Where? All right. Up here.
All right, so welcome everyone to the Hopkinton School Board meeting for, what day is today? Today is Monday. No, today's Tuesday. I'm sorry. It's the second day of the week. I'm getting a thumbs up, so I think I'm right. For Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. So we have with us a full board. So we have Andrea Folsom, Norm Goupel, Seth Aframe. Seth, I almost called you Max Aframe because that's your name, but it's Seth Aframe and Rob Nato. And Jim O'Brien. And then we have with us Steve Chamberlain, superintendent. And, oh, I'm sorry, I've left out Charles DeCurtis, our student rep. With all these faces and this pattern, I'm getting easily confused. And then former board member, Liz Durant is joining us, as is Dulcie Madden, to help us think through our agenda today. So I should have done this to begin, but I'll show our agenda briefly so we know why we're here. I'm hoping that's not going to be what you want to see, but that will be. So our agenda, we'll start off with the call to order and Pledge of Allegiance. And so it's not a very good image of the flag. Might have to do. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And so item number 2 is the statement for emergency conditions. And so we are following the governor's emergency order, which allows us to hold our regularly scheduled school board meetings virtually. We still follow all the requirements of RSA 91A, which is our open meeting guidelines, but the governor's order allows for our meetings to be held completely virtual, so there's not a physical location here this evening, but we are recording the meeting, and so the recording is available following our meeting as our meeting minutes and other requirements to satisfy RSA 91A. And then participants, actually, well, tonight in normal meetings, we will have allow for public comment, but tonight we really have a one meeting agenda. And so we're going to be focusing on communications for the annual district meeting. And so there won't be any public comment this evening, but for all of you, anybody in the public who wishes to provide public comment, we will be meeting again this week on Thursday evening at our regular time at 5:30. In which we'll have 2 opportunities for public comment. But for tonight, we're hoping to just focus on this one issue, which is our communications plan. So before we move into that, Steve, are there any additions or deletions for the agenda tonight? Nope, so we're okay. So we have just the one. And so bear with me one second. There we go. So on Sunday evening, it could have been Sunday morning, but I didn't see the email until Sunday evening. But Sunday evening, James Newsom, our moderator, made a decision that we would be moving forward with our annual meeting on May 16th. And we have, he's proposing a meeting on May 12th. To begin the process of laying out the warrant articles, and then a second virtual gathering on May 15th, May 15th, again to lay out any amendments and then to have some questions and answers or discussion. The rules, the moderator is still working on those and will be put forward. But we have a date certain, and we have 2 dates in which are being proposed for the public to gather to hear information from the school board or school and former board about the warrant articles. And so something that we talked about last week when we met was the need that we have to get information out to the community in a pretty rapid fashion and to allow people to join those meetings and understand the process that we're going through. And so we last week we said once that meeting was announced, we would get back together and have a conversation about communication planning, the methods that we can move forward. And thankfully, Dulcie Madden had been thinking ahead of maybe where we were and started to reach out and do some communication planning, some thoughts about how we can get that information out. And so I'm incredibly grateful and pleased that Dulcie has acted so quickly and really reached out which is a really good plan and well thought through. And so Dulcie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I don't know that I have a plan of attack here. Steve, I don't know if you had anything in mind. I'm happy to actually, if Dulcie's willing, maybe turning it over to Dulcie to start, because I know she's put a lot of thought into this and has a presentation. And so maybe, Dulcie, if you want to unmute yourself, I don't want to I kind of want to tell you what to do, but if you don't mind being voluntold to sort of kick us off, I would love for you to do that.
Sure. Do you want me to walk through the deck? Is that cool? Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Is that also cool if you have a thumbs up? Cool. Okay. All right. So, hey, everybody, I'm Dulcie. Basically, what I started to think through last week was the fact that we are going to be doing the school district meeting in a way that has never been done before, I think, in this town. So just trying to figure out the best way to do that. Jim, if you could enable attendee screen sharing for me somehow, then that would be great. And then I have a few slides that we can walk through and figure out if there's anything that's missing. But just to dive right in,
Dulcie, try it now and see if it works for you.
That works. Yep, perfect.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, cool. So hopefully everyone can see this. Great. So ideally, can everyone see that full screen? Hopefully, loading. Great.
Perfect.
Okay. So basically what the goal is, I think, is to basically be able to provide a safe, socially distanced, unbiased, and objective school meeting where all Hopkinton residents feel informed about the budget and the warrants and the amendments, can access the necessary information, understand the actual deliberative and voting process, can comfortably ask questions and take part, and feel that an excellent effort has been made by the school board to communicate and engage with the public about and throughout this process. I think as part of that, we also want to make sure that there is get out the vote information about the budget and the related process that can easily be sent from voter to voter through email and other means. With the overarching goal of we need to communicate early and as often as we possibly can through as many means as possible. So hopefully that resonates. We can, if people have questions, they should feel free to dive right in. So what we need to do, this is what our thinking was basically think about finalizing the meeting dates with James Newsom. So that's done, which is awesome because that happened yesterday. Finalize the communication plan dates with the board, which we'll run through in just a minute. We have some new materials to develop for circulation given the new format of this meeting. Work on our get out the vote and communication strategy, map out key resident communities to make sure that we have total coverage, and then develop a volunteer list to make sure that we're covering day of needs and also leading up to it. So this is the proposed schedule, and there's a typo at the beginning, so my apologies for that. But essentially yesterday, James Newsom announced the dates and the basic process, which he also shared part of last week, and I know he's still working on part of it. What I'd love to do is tonight be able to approve and finalize communications strategy moving forward, so we can just jump right in, hopefully, as soon as this meeting is adjourned. And then tomorrow, make sure that we are getting out announcements on the dates, which I know it's on the school board website and the school board Facebook page, but anything else that we can post online, I think making sure that people know about it, the 12th, the 15th, and the 16th, get emails going out with basic updates, post flyers locally, and then start developing materials. There's sort of two categories of materials. One is a mailer that will go to every resident in town. And we discussed this a little bit last week, or the board discussed this a little bit last week. So not necessarily just every registered voter, but actually every household. And that will be a super circle around the voter list, which I think is the better way to do it. Just to make sure we catch everyone, and also come up with a budget explanatory deck, given that some people may or may not be attending the meeting, and may or may not have been at any of the meetings that Steve and the board and the budget committee ran in February, March, January, and December. there should also be an accompanying budget FAQ. So for people who are at those meetings, they sort of know there are questions that have popped up, and ideally we're answering them through the set of slides themselves, but it's good to address them anyways. FAQs about the meeting itself. So how will it actually be run on Wednesday and Friday? How will voting actually work on Saturday? Any additional social post language we need, emails, and then last but not least, a new web page on the school district site. And I know that there is a site that is currently there that announces the changes, as well as Moderator Newsom's proposed new dates and rules. And then there's the archived budgets, but ideally we can just make something that's got a simple URL. Over the course of the next 2 days, we will review and finalize those, and then we can also post actual signs around town if we can do it. Ideally, on the 8th, we will get that mailer delivered to all residents in town. If we can do it sooner, that's great, but we should plan on getting it out by the weekend. And then we'll get that second batch of materials posted on the website and any place else we can. And then from there, I think that we should just start focus group outreach. So the Schlesser Senior Center, there isn't a listserv, but they're pretty communicative and active. Hoppy Dems, Hop Cop, Lions, Rotary Club, Women's Club, the Gardening Club, literally anyone that could possibly have an email listserv who we would want to target. From there, I think it's also a great idea for people who may or may not be online and who may or may not be out and about to just start divvying up the phone book and start resident outreach phone calls. And I can talk through a little bit how to do that because I've had a few people volunteer, which is great. Then on the 12th, there's a business session at 7 p.m. I had checked with Moderator Newsom if we can distribute minutes after that. We actually cannot until after the session on the 15th, so there's not a lot of follow-up. But then on the 14th, we'd want to do a second meeting reminder email blast to remind people about the session on the 15th. We'd have the continued meeting. As soon as that's over, we would circulate the final ballot and the ballot FAQ post-meeting and do a final comms push. And then drive-through voting would start at 9 a.m. on the 16th per his guidelines. So that's sort of where we are. It's worth noting also in the mailer, James and I talked about this, we can include a sample ballot that won't be finalized with all of the actual amendments per se, but we can get people used to what the layout of it is going to be, and we can also develop this is what this ballot will look like, these are the initial rules that you need to be aware of. And then people can use that as context for the sessions on the 12th and the 15th, and then we can distribute a final ballot as soon as we possibly can, and people can either print it at home or pick it up at the voting site itself on the 16th. Any questions about this so far, or should I just keep going?
What would you prefer, Dulcie?
I can keep going, and then I guess we can, if that's okay.
Yeah, why don't you keep going, then we could circle back. That'd probably be the better way. Then we could kind of have one discussion.
Okay, great. I'm also aware I historically speak extraordinarily quickly, so thanks for being with me.
You're doing great.
So we've already talked through this, but I think that we should definitely have all the prior materials that have been developed on hand for reference. There was a ton of work that went into the process as it was supposed to happen. But I think that given the fact that there's this new format, there should be some new standalone packets. And I'm calling anyone who is not on the school board or the budget committee a layman, which also includes me, right? So if you weren't there and you aren't immersed in it, then some of these numbers can be a lot. So I think the deck, the presentation packet, should walk through the overall process, the historical trends, the current budget, the numbers, what it covers, what already got cut, and then FAQs, which, you know, I think that between meeting minutes and obviously Steve, you were at all those meetings and you were at Suites with Steve, because you're Steve, we can go ahead and make sure we're covering those. I think it's really important to set up a really clear mailer, right? It's got key links, key dates, key times, meeting info, how are people calling in, how can you submit questions, that sample ballot, just to make sure that people are able to get that information in and have it as soon as they possibly can. A detailed but clear FAQ for how the meeting is going to work. Moderator Newsom's rules are clear, but I think they can also be made potentially more clear and more explicit in terms of, you know, someone who isn't thinking about meeting rules and regulations all the time. Sample ballot, like we discussed, and then a new page on the website, which Steve, I had sent you an email. I'm not sure if that is Matt Stone's domain, but hopefully we could think of something jazzy. Great.
Yeah, you started it. Yep.
And then I think depending on our signs timeline, we can get signs posted on both sides of entry in and to and out of both Hopkinton and Kentucky Village, just to make sure that everyone's able to see that if for whatever reason they can't. And then we can go ahead and ask for a piece in the Concord Monitor too. which I think should be okay. In terms of key stakeholder groups, I think everyone who is obviously on the current and prior school board, so this is people who we want to make sure that we're utilizing for communications and possible review. The budget committee, I had talked with Janet and Don, Mr. Houston as well. Supervisors of the checklist, obviously, because they will run the show on Saturday. School listservs, I'm not sure if it's possible to distribute anything about the actual meeting itself, but I think that if it's objective, then it can go out that way. Select board, which I included mostly because if we do a great job, then hopefully they can use our process, or they can opt to use part of this. PTA, Rotary, Lions Club, and everyone we already talked about. Andrew also had a great idea where we can go ahead and utilize the men's softball group, Scouts, HISA, sort of anything that's out there. If anyone's in town and feels like they have a listserv that we could use, we can go ahead and ask them, which is great. In terms of the Slusser Center community, I had talked with Mrs. Krasaniak and Janet, and she had said that that there are probably definitely some people in that community who could help with phone banking, which is awesome. I definitely think that if anyone has a 746 landline, that will increase the likelihood that someone picks up the phone. And so I'm assuming that most senior citizens still do. I do too. So does Andrea, but we can go ahead and divvy that up as well. So we will need volunteers for posting signs and mailers. One, Norman Goupel, has gamely volunteered to be on signage. Voting day logistics. I had already talked a little bit with Jean Lightfoot, but if they need more runners or people to help with parking, the thought that I had, and really it's a thought from Neil, was possibly the senior class. Phone banking, get out the votes, emails and texts, which I think is basically just getting as many people to circulate as much information as possible of this just blank set of information. And then the only other thing I was thinking about was when the meeting 2 weeks ago, Janet had mentioned that a lot of senior citizens may or may not feel comfortable asking a question live during a digital remote meeting. And so possibly being able to figure out how to have them send their questions to someone else. So either someone can ask during the meeting, or we can figure out how to get those questions answered if they don't feel comfortable doing that. Which I just think is a key thing to be aware of, because we want to make sure that everyone feels included. So in terms of key questions, figuring out if there's a budget, how much it is, right, for printing, mailing signs, probably water for supervisors with the checklist and James on voting day. Nailing down what methods we're using for meetings. And I know there was a little bit of discussion last week about this, but we just need to finalize, you know, what are the URLs going to be? Where are we directing people to? How do the Q&A sessions work? Liz, I think you brought up last week, do we want to do an extra Facebook live session just to get people to understand how the process will work, and we can discuss that. That is not supposed to say when can we circulate a sample budget. It should be sample ballot. I already talked to James about that, and that can basically go this week, which is great. Steve, I think, has already talked to the super over at Bo, but the highs and lows from their process from 2 weeks ago. If there's anyone we're missing, can we order signs in our time frame? Norm, I know you're working on that. I volunteered all of my signs from the campaign, so if people want to paint over them, we can go ahead and do that. Just a list of, is there any place we need to physically post information? And is there a phone list? And there is not one, but we can use a phone book, and we will go old school if we have to. In terms of next dates, just finalize the dates and buy-in, which hopefully we can do today. Finalize leads on materials development. On this list, I had talked to Andrea today, and we basically just divvied it up to make sure there's one point person for all of this. If someone, I would love to be able to involve more people if they're interested. But given that we basically need to finalize everything in the next few days, we just wanted at least one person who could sort of like get rolling and make sure that it's there. I had put down a sample review team. I'm not sure knowing how it needs to work per the school board rules and regulations, but I do know at least it should be, you know, the people listed here. Organized phone banking volunteers, which I think is just, just divvying up the phone book by letters of the alphabet and making a script so that people can call, and then just organizing the day of volunteers, which I have not yet talked to Jean about taking over her volunteers for that, but I know she's already on it. So that is it. That was a lot. Does anyone have any questions so far? Thanks.
Elsie, thank you. That's awesome. It's a lot. And so maybe I'm trying to think through how to start this conversation. I mean, I have a bunch of questions and some of them are for you and I think some of them are for Steve. And I'm sure other board members do too. So the first question I have is really just on the mailing to go out. So so how do we, this is more of like, how do we get that done? In terms of like how many, like physically, how do we get whatever we want to mail to the post office, and then like who does the copying and how does that part happen?
Yeah, so in terms of the actual post office bit, I've been playing phone tag with Paul at the post office. Paul is 71, so he's not at the post office every day these days, but he'll be back in tomorrow, and we had an initial conversation about it. Essentially, he estimated, I think there was between 15 and 1,700 households. That could be totally wrong. I cannot find my notes from our conversation, but for whatever the number of households, and he estimated there would probably be between 16 and 18 cents per piece of mail that has to go out. He budgeted that it would probably be between $500 to $700 per mailing. And basically just needs to be in. We can leave it either the night before or first thing that morning. So if we wanted to get it out on like Friday, we would just drop it off at like 6 a.m. Friday morning, and then it would just go out with all of the carriers.
Elsie, is that by page or is that by unit? Because we just did the Hopkinton. We did a flyer to catch people without the internet and we did a 1-page front and back. And it was very easy. We did it all. We copied it. We designed it, copied it. We made sure we had the correct, stamp there. You don't stamp it, but you put, just got to make sure it's there. But that was 1 page. So is it the same cost or is it per page?
It's by weight. And so I had assumed that we'd probably have like a double-sided two pieces of paper, like a bifold or like an 8x4, 11 by 14, whatever it is. And I think he said that it would be the same cost if it was basically 2 pages. It doesn't bump it up into the next weight class.
So 2 pieces of paper, 4 sides is one price?
Yep.
And that's what you're thinking probably as max, right? 2 pieces of paper, both sides?
I think so. I mean, I think that if it's more than that, people sort of.
I agree, yeah. I think that's the max.
And would that be in an envelope? I mean, this is pretty detailed.
Yeah. It depends on how much space we have. I mean, it would be easiest if we could literally just fold it over and have a sticker be there. And so you would lose one side of it to like 2 all current residents, most likely. So it would be one.
It's easier without an envelope, a lot less person power and a lot less. So if we could do it with just stack them, hand them, and they drop them.
Yeah, and if we really wanted to, we could just get a stamp that says to all current residents or whatever on the front of it. For printing resources, I actually have not called, I don't know if we're able to use the SAU printer. It would be like a high volume print. So if it's too much for the machine, I'm guessing that there might be a Kinko's or something still in town.
I think 2 pieces of paper, double side, 3,000 or so. I think we can do that.
Okay, cool.
So the information that we would send out via the mail would be somewhat limited because we have space. So I'm just thinking if we can't send James's draft rules because that would cover more than what I think we can mail out. So what we would end up mailing out is really just the notice of dates, how to access the virtual meetings, and then a little bit of the run of show, I guess, for how we would do voting. But we'd just be limited on what we can send out to folks.
Yeah, I think we'd have to be pretty good with formatting, and if we needed to, we could possibly add one more because I do think it would be helpful to give people a physical ballot that they can have in front of them for the meetings on the 12th and the 15th, because I think that something visual is generally helpful.
And I think the rules might also. I'm just sort of because we're asking people to vote. The first thing that people are going to vote on are the rules.
That's a call, yeah.
And so it feels like, but right now I don't know how many pages the rules are because I haven't looked at them, but they're multiple, and so.
I think with the last time I looked at him, he had squeezed them onto a page and a half, so it'd take one piece of paper front and back.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I think that being able to think about how we're framing the information, and Andrea, I know, is a graphic designer, so I think it would be pretty helpful to be able to have her in there to make it so if we were including more information, it doesn't look too overwhelming, but so that there's very clear places where people can go.
Steve, what did folks get in Bo? Because I know you received the mailing, and I know you
I think
circulated.
I think it was 5-page packet.
Okay. Yeah.
And we can look at or Dulcie can look at the price on what a 5-pager with I think it was stapled. James just texted. Rules are on 3 sides plus ballot, 2 sheets from me.
Great.
So, well, maybe that we want to do an initial mailing this week. So if we could get something out by end of the week, that's pretty simple. That may just be like, we're having the meeting, here are the dates, and then work next week to put together, I guess, a packet.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we can see how much we can get done in the next couple of days, because I think that like the residents will definitely not get sent the explanatory deck, you know what I mean, that goes along with the budget. People will have to go online for that because that will just be too much information. We could feasibly, and I was thinking about this today, we could feasibly print out copies of that and leave it around town hall or at the SAU. But people, I think also, and you had mentioned this last week, Jim, I think that there might still be like copies of the actual, school report lurking around that we could leave out too. It's just that no one can get in there. So we'd be leaving boxes out every morning, which is fine. But yeah, we can map out the mailer content like, tonight if that makes sense and get it rolling for sure.
Andrea, you got your hand up.
I do indeed. So Bo it looked like Bo actually had 6 pages. And I think what they put out is actually a really good template. Basically, the first 2 pages are kind of an introduction to what's happening and why we're doing it, and then lists out their rules. Only took 2 pages, so 1 page front and back. So we might have to have a smaller font for that. And then they've got some really just very clear, here's where you go, here's who you contact if you have an issue. I really feel like, and then sort of the basics of what Saturday's voting would look like. I don't know, I think that kind of based off of this, it's certainly something that we could put together pretty quickly. I think the question is, would we be okay with putting out a 6-pager versus a 2-pager?
Yeah, I would think that it's probably better to put out 1 thing that's more volume than try to put out 2 things. The first will create a lot of questions. Just get it all out there.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that. If we can do it, I mean, if we can get all this stuff together and do it all at once, that feels like a good way to go.
Yeah, I agree, definitely.
As long as I think, as long as Steve's printer, now we're talking about a lot more pages to print out, and then we're also, I mean, I guess if we can fold and staple, that's also more manpower, I guess. We have to fold and staple or put them in an envelope.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, we're going to send these out to all the PO boxes as well, correct? This is going to everybody.
Everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, someone made that comment last week, which is great.
Yeah. So who, and you had this, and I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. So who's in charge of this piece?
So I can take a stab at putting together all the content, but there will be some pieces for that in terms of definitely working with James, definitely working with you guys, and then Andrea, if I could pull in some of your graphic design help, that would be jazzy, just as an overview. But I think that we can definitely get this. I can take my goals for tomorrow would basically be to get a draft of the mailer done, and then get a draft of the overview deck wrapped up on my end.
And this is a question, I think, for the board members. Like, how do you guys feel about, I mean, what's a review process that feels good for the board about getting this type of thing out? Because I assume we have to have an introductory letter. And there's be things I think we'd all want to look at to make sure they're in there, or we might want to review at some level. So what I don't know what feels right or not, but how would board members like to do that piece?
I think if we can have a draft, and then do I don't know if we have to do another quick meeting just to discuss any edits or how layouts are, whether, that happens on Thursday, and then actually get things produced and out the door on Friday. And I'm certainly happy to help with, whatever parts of this I can help with.
Dulcie, does that sound, because we do have a meeting Thursday, does that sound like a okay time frame? It's probably not the best time frame, but having sort of materials ready for review on Thursday.
Yeah.
That way at least the board can.
So
Totally.
that would mean Thursday sign off, Friday copy and do it. It would probably mean Saturday distribution.
Yep.
Which you mean it hits boxes
Saturday, which that's everyone here's final call, but that would give us three and a half days before the first meeting, which I think if we were also doing phone banking, email, by Saturday, Sunday, almost everyone should have been hit with an initial touch.
And I think check with the post office just to make sure that if it comes in Friday,
Yeah.
I don't know how fast those can be produced. It just, if it gets done Friday,
Yeah.
afternoon-ish, if that's still in time.
Yeah.
They do Saturday delivery, right?
You do Saturday, yep.
Yeah.
So I think if it's there at the end of business on Friday, they'll deliver Saturday.
Yep.
Liz, I saw your hand up. I'm sorry.
That's okay. And Dulcie, thank you so much. I just have this afternoon, but thank you so much for all your work in this. Really, really comprehensive, and very much appreciate all the visual, sort of bulleted, slides and things like that to sort of gather thoughts. So it's really helpful, and I'm very grateful for your help on this. And I think that one of the things that I want to make sure is that with Matt and Bill and I being part of the presentation next week,
Yes.
I feel very strongly about being part of the review process as well.
Sure. Yep.
Just because I think that making sure that it's consistent, if we're going to be doing the presenting next week, that, we also just have a chance to take a look at it and make sure that it's sort of what we're expecting and we're on the same page, if you will, with all of it. So if we could also just be able to have one look at it, by Thursday night kind of thing, to make sure that again, it's kind of what we anticipated we were going to be planning to do next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Liz, we have the meeting scheduled on Thursday. So, I mean, I would just say you guys are all invited to be part of that conversation.
I was planning on being there. So
perfect. Yep.
Because I figured tonight we were going to be talking most about the process, and Thursday night we'd be talking about the content.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So that we would need to be there Thursday night as well.
So then when is it good actually for that? That's a great point. So if I get it to people by if I give it to you, Jim, by noon, well, how soon do I have to give it to you so people can have ample time to review it by the Thursday night meeting? If I send it to you by noon on Thursday, and hopefully I would have run it by a couple of people before them, but could you post it into a folder or something and then people could look at it?
Yeah.
I can put it in a shared folder.
Yeah, I'd say the sooner you can get, the better, but we'll be going over it all in the meeting. So, but yeah, I think the sooner the better, but up until the meeting, we can put it in folders.
Okay.
The packet is hopefully in notes, and the packet will go out tomorrow morning, and then I'll add stuff as we need to.
Okay, great.
Had a lot of meetings.
Oh yeah.
Great. Okay, other questions?
So there's there's proposal for flyer documentation rules, procedures. And I also saw, and we've done this in the past, we didn't do it yet, but if there's a desire to put an FAQ together for this year's budget, I do have a form. We often have done an FAQ on the budget, what's in, and if the board would like me to put that together, I can use, we do have a template for that, and I can bring that to the meeting as well on Thursday.
Yeah.
If there's interest in the FAQs.
Yeah.
For budget.
Yep.
who is making the flyer?
I think that probably that can still be a combination of Andrea and I, and then Norm, if you're good with flyering and or figuring out like.
Yeah, I could figure out the flyer and bar and the signs. I did reach out to a couple places today to discuss getting signs. We just won't have any time to order signs, but we can use reusable signs where you can put stuff up there. And I'm trying to reach out to some people to see who has access to that. I guess my question is what do we want to be said of the signs? Just generic voting.
Are the town has those signs that they have I don't know what they're called, the
Signboards?
That's it, signboards. That's a good word
Yeah.
for it. And so I think the recreation department has like 3 or 4 of them. And so I give
Yeah.
Neil a call, and I'm sure they would allow us to use those and put signs in town.
I think PTA has one, Andrea, too.
I do.
And then HISA, I think, has some too. So, but I want to be consistent with what you guys deem appropriate on the signs. So if you guys want to think about that, I could reach out to these individuals and you just say, hey, this is what we want to be on the sign. I am sure our local restaurants will be fine with placing them. I can talk to, I don't know if I need Neil's permission or Chief Yale's, but, right by the police station, the fire station is a good location to put a sign. I don't know if the select board have to approve. I don't know, but
Let
I'll
me
think
know
of
what you
some
want the high school sign to.
Yeah. Oh yeah, good call.
Yeah, and we can change the high school sign.
I mean, there's not a lot of space. I think basically we need people to know that there are virtual meetings on the 12th and 15th, and voting is on the 16th.
Yeah. And then if any of them are big enough, if we can come up with a short enough URL for the website, like vote or meeting.hopkintonschools. We can work through that, but that would only be if there's sign, which I don't think there is on anything except for the high school. So.
Okay, I'll reach out to these people, but you guys give me a cue what you guys are looking for on there, and then I'll work on some hot spots in town, and I'll probably do a little social communication. I have some residents who are willing to help with that to help get out maybe to Rotary, some communication, some businesses, for some flyers and all that stuff to get out there.
Nope. Is there a list of places that we formally have to post, Steve? Like I know that you usually post.
Yeah, and we have posted, and we've posted Moderator Newsom's change in schedule. So that has been posted already.
Okay. But is it anything other than Colonial and the Crack? Is it Cracker Barrel?
We post at the schools for the warrant. I think we did it at the schools too.
Well,
Steve, on the technology side, for the 12th and the 15th, are we all set with sort of just our needs and what we're going to do, and can we get the URL out so that
Yeah, I talked to Matt today, and the Bo model was Zoom, phone number, and YouTube Live, and we have the capacity for all those 3, and so we'll test and create URLs for all those. Well, for the 2, and then we'll have the phone number. Does that sound? So we'll use 3 versions. And as I think I told Jim and Liz, I think YouTube Live was the #1 choice, just for some reason. It's a little stable.
Yeah.
So yeah, Matt has already done that, and I think he wants to test, just try dry run soon before we create the URL. So we'll have those tomorrow.
Just one quick comment on the flyer idea, and that is that I just would want to make sure, Norm, especially if you're going to reach out to some people that have social media sites, is that we give them a PDF of what should be disseminated or distributed, and that's what's posted, not somebody's sort of interpretation of things. I just would worry that
Agreed.
might get missed. But if we give them a PDF of exactly what needs to be posted, that I think would be the best way to disseminate it. If just from the perspective of people can share it easily.
Yes, and I think
Great idea.
body of the actual post itself, we can have recommended text. Yeah.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah. And I was thinking the same thing. So, and we haven't quite gotten to this, but phone bank and, you know, asking people to make phone calls. I think if it's coming from the school board or the school district, I mean, we have to be pretty consistent in how we're doing both the calls and then what they're saying, and then also in some ways, like who's being called. And so just to think about that and how we do that as a school board versus volunteers on their own making calls and to get people out.
Yeah, well, and I think, and that's a great question. So my thought had been that we could literally give a script that's like, hey, this is, and I don't know if we necessarily even want people to say they're calling on behalf of the Hopkinton School Board. I mean, like, I can make a ton of these calls too, but the, what we'd write out the script to say, you know, I'm just calling to let you know that the school district meeting has changed. It will be a new format since it will be remote and digital, and then voting will happen this way. Please go here for more information, just so people at least know when the meeting dates are and where they can go for more info. But I think we would want to draft, and I think that also that would be something that would ideally be approved by the board, right? That they would, if it's comfortable for them to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought a little bit about the same thing. And I guess my only concern is that I wouldn't want to volunteer to get posed a question that they think they can answer or feel compelled they need to answer because somebody has them on the phone and they want to, you know, they want to get them to, you know, to sort of buy into it. So they feel as if they need to be compelled to answer something that they're really not suited to answer. And even if they're trying, even with the best intentions, that's why I say, I'm not saying that this is without good intentions. It's just, I worry a little bit about that. And instead, I think we might be well served to use the call system with a recorded message that comes from, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, Steve or Jim or, you know, whomever records it and it goes out to Steve. How many phone numbers for that?
1,200.
So we hit 1,200 phone numbers. That's a pretty wide swath, if you will. I know it's not everybody. I know that it's a struggle, you know, to get to some of the corners on some of this. But again, I guess, you know, I want to just be sure that there is some element of just oversight, if you will, on those on that piece. And again, it's no different than somebody going door to door who's, you know, working for a campaign and somebody asks them a question, you know. I mean, it's just the way it is. So
and I mean, I tend to agree with you. That's been my thinking too. It's not any bad intentions. It's just there's questions volunteers aren't going to be able to answer, or
I wouldn't want them to frustrate somebody that they can't. I guess that's really what it comes down to. If somebody says, well, I can't answer that for you, is that going to disenfranchise the person on the other end of the phone? Depending on who it is.
How do other folks feel about that?
So go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, thanks. Well, I was going to say, I think it could still be helpful to come up with a script, and then it can be posed such as, if you would like to reach out to members in your community, here's a script that you can use. You know, you're not calling on behalf of the school board, you know, but if you feel, you know, I'm thinking of folks who have friends who may not know all of these meetings and everything that's going on. And sometimes it can be scarier to cold call and not quite knowing what you're going to say, versus at least if we're able to give some structure. I think that could be helpful, and just help with the clarity and transparency piece.
Yeah.
Norm, what were you gonna? Or I'm sorry.
So I did a lot of phone banking prior in the last primary, and usually the script lasted for 2 or 3 or 4 calls, and then it usually goes out the window pretty quickly, depending upon who's on the other end of the line. So I definitely see what Liz is talking about. Using the school list would be a great way to hit our school population. I got a call from a community member today, very concerned about the senior population and making sure that they get the message and they have an opportunity to, you know, get informed. But also, you talked about transportation. That's not the point here, but I'm just wondering if there is a list where we could target our phone banking towards our seniors that live in town, or if that is problematic because now we've targeted a specific group.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering in both circumstances. So I don't think there's a list. At least I haven't seen one. There may be private lists or people have
Yeah.
phone trees.
Right.
It may be that it may be our reach, I say, is limited, but we're going to mail every household, so that doesn't feel like a limited reach.
Yeah, yeah.
But in terms of the advocacy to certain groups, that maybe we do as much as we can to set as broad of a path as we can, and not try to get. If people want to do individual outreach, that's great.
Yeah.
But in terms of what we can control as a district, it may be more
Yeah.
limited.
Does TDS offer, like, would there be any, I don't know if it's even possible, to all 746 numbers, the recording? Is that something they can do as a community?
I can ask. I had asked Neil if there was any sort, well, because I live next to town hall. So I asked him, but he said there wasn't a formal list that the town had access to, but TDS might. They obviously produced the phone book.
Yeah. That
Senior-
just occurred to me that, I don't know if they can do it as legally as a community type announcement
Right.
or not. But if it went the same message that went out on our call system
Right.
went out to all 746 numbers,
Yeah.
then essentially we're casting that wider net as far as we possibly can, with a lot of duplication, I'm sure.
Right.
But at least casting as far as I think we possibly can.
Yeah.
So
Are we allowed to use the schools, Steve's winter delay, like as a reminder to people to come out? Is that an avenue we could use?
Yeah, we can announce dates, times, and where to get information.
Yeah, I would like to use that. I mean, that's a great thing to use. It'll hit a certain amount of people.
I think to Rob's point, I think there will be people who may question, whether or not we're only hitting one small demographic with that type of outreach.
We can try. I mean, so I'll call TDS tomorrow and I'll find out if they have anything community wide. The other thing we can do is maybe for the senior center, they don't have a listserv at the Slusser Center, but they might have a list of phone number. Like we can go through and make this map for different demographics to make sure. But they might have people's contact information. They could do their own independent phone chain. You know what I mean? But I don't know.
Yes. So maybe this is one we can, on Thursday, if there's more information, we can kind of maybe try to hammer this one out instead of figuring it out now on the fly.
And it wasn't supposed to start until after materials are done anyway. So that's okay. I can do some recon. Yep. Cool. That is all good feedback. Other questions?
I have questions about the amount of material and new materials that needs to go out. So obviously there's a lot of information that's in the school district booklet that I'm sure Steve could be put or is already on the website. So I'm just curious about beyond the rules and a sample ballot and maybe a dry run of what that's going to look like. Do we feel like we need to put out more information about warrants themselves, or has that due diligence already been done?
So we have, the warrant that's in the town report, so we've warned the meeting with the language in the warrant. So we could, that's what people are voting on. So we could include a copy of the warrant, which includes all these numbers. And then also in the town report, we have the warrant. I forget what it's called, but it's the warrant with explanation. Steve, there's a more of a technical term for that, but it's the warrant with a little bit of language that we've already put out to the community that talks about each article and what it means. And that's, so we may want to just reuse that and send that out because it's already been published.
I guess my thinking is, we've all been to town meeting where people are picking up their warrant articles for the first time as they're walking through the door. And I want people to have as much information as necessary, but I don't know that in 10 days we would produce everything differently than we don't already do now. That's probably a great discussion moving forward into next year if we want to make some changes there. But I'm thinking about the information from the budget committee on the, it's like 60 pages about the budget. That'd be a great thing to have up there. and everything that is in that school district binder that I've got around here.
And and that's already on the district website under the fiscal year 21 page. So that's all there. And my only thinking was essentially that Steve already produces a deck that he does, which Steve, you've done to the budget committee, speaks with Steve, and you do around to explain. My only thought was that if people to vote on the budget, you usually have to be there and listen to, the presentation and everything else, would be to basically put the comments that Steve does with the slide on there so people can like read through it, even if session, that they can get the audio, extra context.
Maybe all of that could be put on the same page that Matt created for this. So it's all, you don't have to go look for it. Everything is on this voting page.
There should be one page that's like a well-organized one-stop shop that includes the work that's already been done. And then this is, exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, we can work on, we had little things, I don't know if it was a while ago, but we did rack cards. We have rack cards, which was a very quick summary for people in the meeting. We had an FAQ for the Teamsters contract, FAQ for the teachers contract. I'll do an FAQ for the budget. We had the beautiful, wonderful newsletter. I'm just kidding. That had some of this stuff that I sent out like the week before.
Yeah.
So I think the mailing, my gut says the mailing is the changes to the rules. And then the website is full of information to kind of refresh, right? Because I think the mailing is going to be probably 6 pages by now.
Yeah.
And I think we'll just go, but reference to, and Matt and I can work on the website and putting all that stuff together. But
yeah.
I think that makes sense to refresh the brain, but also inform of the new rules.
And the only thing I would I think to add as a slight amendment is if I do think we might want to include the warrant in the mailing. It's
okay.
Because we are asking people to go to town meeting to vote on things, and so it's not that I'm looking at the annual report now, and it's 12 articles.
Right, and it's the summary
page
page
and a half.
And the one with the summary with the tax impact.
Yeah.
The last thing I thought about, and Liz had brought it up last time we met, was some people are much better with the visual learning, and I think this is what you meant, Liz, but I'm not sure. But I was thinking, if James did a little video overview and it just went up as a YouTube link so that it's there. So anytime anybody went, they could just click on that. Here's a video explanation of how this is going to roll. The moderator gets his time. And I don't know if that's different than a Facebook Live, if that's a one-time shot or if that's a...
No, actually, I like the idea of a YouTube that somebody can easily retrieve from a link, as opposed to a Facebook Live, which you can always go back and find it in a feed, but it's a lot more difficult to go back and find it. But if he does a YouTube tutorial almost,
right,
I think it'd be great. I just think those kinds of things are helpful for people who, like you say, either need somebody to speak to them about it, as opposed to reading a whole bunch of text on a 5 pieces of paper, or just to almost confirm what's going to happen, so it sort of reduces anxiety.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
If we add a Mr. Carosa song, we'll get some good hits.
We could have him open it with a little ditty.
We'll get lots of hits.
It'd be good. It would.
Amazing. Okay, that's a great call. And we can follow up with James about that. Sweet.
So is there anything, so I was hoping to keep this meeting to an hour, because we do have a ton, and it sounds like we have a good short-term, at least a bunch of things that we're going to try to get done by Thursday, and then hopefully on Thursday we'll have more information if there's any phone trees that we can do. Probably have an update on the websites as well. How's that going? Is there anything else that folks feel that we need to cover now? Or Dulcie, do you feel like you have enough to go on for sort of what you've taken on as well?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Steve, if you are cool with me just calling you tomorrow, that would be jazzy.
Yeah, you bet. And I'm in the office. Just call my seller in the office. Tomorrow we have pizza day at the high school.
What?
So we're out socially distancing, providing pizza for kids tomorrow. They're trying to wave. So I'm in and around, but I plan to be in the office for a little bit, and I've got some meetings. But yes, let's touch base tomorrow, and I'll start working on the FAQs, and we'll fire up.
I got one last thing.
Please.
It's definitely different than what we normally do because it doesn't exist for a regular school district meeting, but it was brought up to me today about transportation for seniors. So, and there is an organization in town that already does that. So maybe if we can, you know, if you are a senior and then you're not aware of that, and that these folks would be available to pick you up and take you to the polls so you could vote, if they felt comfortable in that scenario. I know that means not social distancing in a car, but I told that person I would mention it. So there it is.
Can we get Dial-A-Ride? Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Is Dial-A-Ride still active right now?
I don't know.
Because I thought for some reason that they, due to physical distancing, had stopped. So I'm not sure if that would be a workable solution right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, Andrea and Delcy, you're going to work on some type of flyer, and I'm going to work on trying to get some signs from multiple sources. I'll do my best, and then on Thursday we'll come up with what we want what we want on the signs, so we're all on the same page.
I think that's good. And then, because then I think on Thursday, if we had all that information, then, the board can give a green light, and then we'll have the input from Liz and the former board as well about, what they'd like to see is to make sure we're all on the same page as we move forward. So that, I think if we could try to wrap this all into our Thursday meeting, that may be the to get this all rolling.
Just want to make sure we're all on the same page with what I'm doing.
Jim, I may grab you early tomorrow to reduce some of the agenda items on that current one. Like, I think we can table policy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So we'll connect tomorrow on that.
I'll call you early for just because it looks like it's a pretty full agenda, and this is the most important thing that we can do for the next 2 weeks. So.
Yeah. And feel free anytime. I know you're up early, Steve. So anytime after 7:30 is fine with me.
Deal. Thank you. I'll touch base with you early tomorrow.
I'll get the mailer content and the deck ASAP. So I'll get that over to you, Jim. Sweet.
Jim, does the board have to agree on a budget for this, or we pretty much will discuss that Thursday, or what is are we just kind of?
Well, I think so. Steve, you can kick me under the virtual table, if you will. I mean, I'm just the cost. If we're talking really about a couple mailings, which will be sub $1,000, each, I think, or the one to get out, and there's a second one, and then most of the other stuff we're talking about is stuff we already have approved, like a Zoom meeting's already approved. The signs and flyers are going to be inexpensive. So Steve, I think we can.
I'm comfortable with that. Yeah.
No, and this is trying to have the best meeting, right? As the objectives that Dulcie laid out, it's all good. No, we're fine.
We should do we should maybe do a get out the vote airplane, like have the buttering in the sky. That might be a budget buster.
A drone.
Now you're pushing it.
We can get a drone out.
There's the guy that flies above Andrea's house for like 6 hours every Saturday, so we can ask him.
Bob Lepre has a drone. He did it. He took it for the artist thing we did. So.
Andrea, I happen to know that guy, by the way.
Do you?
I do, and I've talked to him about it.
He has a lot of fun up there.
House too.
Yeah.
Delcy, I just want to say thank you very much for coming up with this and bringing it to the board. It's fantastic. It's well organized, and thank you. It's community members like you that really help this get going.
Happy to do it. Very happy.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody else have anything else in their mind? Actually, I shouldn't ask it that way. Any other questions about the communication strategy?
I think the last thing I have is Liz had mentioned a Facebook Live. Is that something in the card still, for a timetable thing?
We might look at YouTube, I think, and then we can link it, but we'll work on that.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you, Dulcie. I echo Norm. This is great. Thank you for taking the initiative and helping us out. This is a major plus. So really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
And so we'll see everybody Thursday at 5:30.
Perfect.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all. Have a wonderful night. Thanks.
Bye.